And so I just wanted to start off with a review here, and let me also change the size. Yeah, good. So we were talking about glycolysis, and we had the different steps to glycolysis. We had step 1, which remember we start off with glucose, and we were making glucose 6-phosphate. And so what class or classes of enzymes do the transfer of phosphates? Because this one did utilize, I don't have it shown, but it did utilize an ATP. So what class of enzymes? There's a kinase, and this one in particular would be called hexokinase. I'm going to abbreviate. And one important thing about it is the fact that it's also irreversible. So it's one of the reaction checkpoints, so to speak. Then we had number 2. This is where we went, and we were making sure I don't skip any steps. I was trying to do it from memory. Sometimes I do. I have been known to rewrite glycolysis, which is not good. So number 2 is the one where we change it from glucose 6-phosphate to fructose 6-phosphate. So remember, we didn't change the number of carbons or hydrogens. We didn't change the phosphates or anything like that. And so what class of enzymes did this kind of reaction? It's an isomerase. And so this one in particular has the 2 names. It's phosphohexosisomerase is probably the one that I call it the most. But it's also called phosphoglycolisomerase. But I like phospho, and like I said, I'm going to be abbreviating hexo because they're both phosphohexoses. And it's an isomerase. The other class of enzymes that also do isomerization reactions are called mutases. Okay, and I think one of them is probably just a historical artifact from the other. So many times when people, unless it changes the actual enzyme that's involved, I usually will give you all, or most if not all, the credit if you call something a mutase, it's an isomerase, and vice versa. Like I said, once in a big while, we'll see something where it does matter. For example, hexokinase and glucokinase. A glucokinase, you'll find out, is a very specific isoform. It's only utilized in 2 tissues, or otherwise, well, you'd probably die. And so, but that's why, that one, it doesn't matter that you call it hexokinase. All right. So then we go from fructose 6-phosphate to fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. Fructose, and like I said, I'm abbreviating. Oh, not BP. Okay, so we are adding, at the expense of another ATP, we're adding a phosphate. And these also require, remember, anytime, a good rule of thumb to have is whenever we're working with phosphates, almost always you can guarantee that magnesium is a required cofactor. Okay, there's going to be magnesium. You're right, there are going to be magnesiums involved. Okay, and so this was a kinase as well. Does anyone remember what kinase in particular? This was my favorite one, one of my favorites to say. Because it always reminds me of Dukes of Hazzard with Roscoe Pico training. I don't know why. It just always sticks in mind. This is phosphofructokinase. It's PFK. PFK1 in particular. But it's phosphofructokinase 1. Oops, that's supposed to be a P. And it's also irreversible, and it's the second checkpoint. There are only 3 checkpoints to glycolysis. Steps 1 and 3, and then one that we have not covered yet. All right, and one other thing we wanted to point out so far is, remember, this had 6 carbons up here, and we're still at 6 carbons. But once we get to a certain point, we have to multiply everything by 2, because our ultimate goal is to take some 6 carbons, we're going to break it down to things that have 3 carbons each. All right. Just let me move it all up. Oh, yes. It needs some sound effects, some music. All right. And trust me, you don't want to hear me sing. So then we had from step 4, which was different. Okay. Step 4 is the step where we're breaking it apart. And I'm going to draw it like this. Okay. We're breaking into 2 3-carbon containing compounds. Did I say that right? 2 compounds that contain 3 carbons, yes. All right, one was our good friend DHAP, which is dihydroxyacetone phosphate. Oops, that one actually they don't usually put. And then the other one is glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. Oh, that's probably not the good one to do, GALD. Because GAL a lot of times is the abbreviation for galactose, the sugar. Which, once again, it doesn't matter to me if you abbreviate something, especially if you when writing things out, you just say, this is my key for having to write out. I don't want to have to write out glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate every single time. And that's fine with me. So the enzyme here, I didn't leave much space. This enzyme right here, since we're breaking it apart, you know, sometimes people will call it a lyase, or we'll talk about that kind of functionality. But this is the one that's got a special name. It's called aldolase. And the way that I always remember it is the fact that the product, glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, is an aldol. Okay, because it has an aldehyde and an alcohol on it. Or what would be an alcohol, because it's been phosphorylated. But so that's step 4. And that's why we now have to realize that not everything. So here, well, up above was step 1, which I've already gone too far. So that's step 4, step 3, step 2, and up above where we can't see was step 1. This is step 5. Step 5 is reversible, as is step 4, by the way. Okay. But step 5 is reversible. But it's the one that only half of the molecules go through, and it's DHAP becoming, for glycolysis, it's it's DHAP, and I don't have my cough drops or my lifesavers with me. I forgot to bring them. So it's DHAP becoming glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, and so that's why this is step 5. And since these are isomers of each other, what kind of enzyme, what class of enzymes do? It's an isomerase. And does anyone remember what its name was? It's another generic one. No, I mean generic because it's based off of the kind of compound that both glyceraldehyde and DHAP are. Because we're still talking about sugars, and so what's the ending for sugars? Triose. This is triose phosphate isomerase, which I'm going to abbreviate as TPI. Triose phosphate isomerase. Yeah, so it's 2, by the way. It's only 1 and 3 so far that are irreversible. And so then we have step 6, which is where we had glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. And this one's special. Okay, this one I am going to try to add things in. Oh, here, let me redo something. First of all, let me move all this up so it gives myself more room. This one is special. So we have, and a lot of times they like to shove this kind of stuff in. It's an inorganic phosphate. Oh, that turned out so pretty. Okay, it won't happen again, I guarantee you probably. And an NAD plus becoming, what does NAD plus become? NADH. This one right here is very important because this is what ultimately, remember, I know a lot of people who talk about how a lot of times people will talk about, well, glycolysis is used to make ATP. However, it's really indirect. And what we're going to see is with almost all these metabolic pathways that are used for making energy, is they make what they call reducing equivalents, or NADH or FADH2. Those make a lot more ATPs in the long run than the ATPs that get made directly. Because so far, we've used up 2 ATPs. We haven't even broken even yet. And later on, we'll find out that NADH can go on to make up to 2.5 ATPs for every 1 NADH. FADH2 is 1.5 ATPs. And so that's why that's really important. That's a little asterisk. It utilizes an NAD, NADH, and inorganic phosphate. And so what class of enzymes was it that typically utilized NAD, NADH? It's a dehydrogenase. Okay. And so this one's got the long name, which I'm going to abbreviate. It's glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate dehydrogenase. It tells you specifically. And so in this, I mean, you can make the argument it's got phosphorylase activity, but its overwhelming characteristic here is the dehydrogenase activity. Because the NADH is what's important. I shouldn't say it's why it's important. It is, it's important. So, once again, this is my abbreviation. glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate dehydrogenase. But that, if you learn enzyme names, that tells you so much about what it is. And I think that's right where we left off. No, we covered 7, didn't we? We covered 7. So when we left off, we had just broken even on our ATPs. All right, so glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate now has become 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate. 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate. Or if I wanted to, we can say BPG. All right. Okay, and so we make an ATP here. It did require I don't have enough room, but magnesium once again is involved. Okay, and then what class of enzymes would this be that's utilizing this? It's a kinase. And does anyone remember what one this one's called? Oh, by the way, the final product here is 3-phosphoglycerate. Oh, I misspelled glycerate. Please forgive me. Glycerate. This is phosphoglycerate kinase, because both of these are phosphoglycerates. One of them's got 2 phosphates, one's got 1. So this is once again, I'm just abbreviating glycerate kinase. And so that, I haven't been numbering these, I'm sorry. That was 6, and this one was 7. Awesome. So now we're up to reaction 8, which is new, and I won't put on this figure because it's where we left off on the boxes.
What was the other step we made the ATP in besides number 7? It was...
We haven't made any ATP in, remember, we're multiplying this by 2.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Remember, that's the hard part, and that's one of the reasons why I kind of like drawing it this way, because then you see it's shifted to the right. I guess you can shift it, it doesn't really matter. But it's shifted to the right, almost as if it's missing the other half. Because you have to remember, from this point on, we multiply everything by 2. Because we start off with 6 carbons, and so it's happening twice.
But we used 2 ATPs.
We used 2 ATPs in steps 1 and 3, so we just now broke even. And we still haven't come up with the 3rd checkpoint yet, or glycolysis. All right. Oops, that's reaction 7, which we covered. Reaction 8. We have 3-phosphoglycerate becoming 2-phosphoglycerate. Kind of gives it away. What kind of enzyme can do this type of reaction?
Isomerase.
It is an isomerase. But this one is the mutase. And technically it's got 2 names that are acceptable. Once again, if you had called it an isomerase, you'd give most, if not all, the credit for it. It does require magnesium. Because we're talking about phosphates moving around, anytime like that, just out of habit, just write down magnesiums. Magnesiums are important. But this one, the 2 names.
What's a mutase?
It's right here. Pardon?
What does it do?
Mutases are isomerases. They're the same. They're the same.
Okay.
I think I don't know this, but if I had to hypothesize, my guess would be mutases may be more of a historical artifact in naming. It's not, to my knowledge, there's nothing like, it doesn't utilize ATP or anything like that, so we can't make that differentiation like we can with kinases and phosphorylases or synthases and synthetases. Or what you'll find out, oxidases versus oxygenases. Those are ones that sound a lot alike, and they do very similar things, but there are very specific different. We haven't covered those yet.
Mm-hmm. So this one, we have to put mutase because it's specific to this.
But this one's specific. I mean, if you, I'd give you most, not all, the credit if you said phosphoglycerate isomerase. Because people wouldn't understand what you're talking about. That means it's an isomerization enzyme that utilizes phosphoglycerate. Just make sure when it's again, this one does, since phosphates are moving, it does require magnesium. And one thing I wanted to point out is I don't require you to memorize these structures per se. However, if you know glycerol, you can work your way around all of these. Because glycerate means it's a carboxylic acid derivative. So there's the carboxylate derivative, and then the 3-phosphate. So that's why, so 2-phosphoglycerate, here's 1, 2, 3 carbons. They all have oxygens on them. The glycerate ending, and then we move to phosphate. So that's why you're going to see them over and over and over again, those that are based off of glycerol. Just like you're going to see things based off of your amino acids. And so if you know your amino acids, you can figure out going backwards or forwards in the metabolic pathways. Okay, I don't really have anything special to say about this one that I can think of off the top of my head. So then we're at to reaction 9. Okay. This one makes our good friend PEP. So we go from 2-phosphoglycerate to phosphoenolpyruvate. PEP. Does anyone remember the very first lecture that we had? I think it was the first lecture, or actually the only lecture that we really had on chapter 13. What was so special about PEP? This name kind of implies it. PEP. What's so special about PEP? What's pyruvate? When something's got PEP, what does it have? Energy. Remember, this is like one of the highest, if not the highest, normal phosphate-containing energy things. All right? And so, but we're not PEP-based, we're ATP-based. I shouldn't say ATP-based, but we use ATP as our currency, not PEP. But PEP, we've had to go through all these steps to make PEP here because PEP has high energy. This is a dehydration means losing of water here, reaction. Okay. This one's got a special name as well. Okay, so I used to quiz people, and I get like dehydrogenases and hydrotases and things like that, which you could name it this one. But this one is named after the type of compound that it makes. This is enolase. This is our good friend enolase. We have aldolase, we have enolase in this, because this is an enol. I know it doesn't look like an enol, but see it says enol. Because remember, phosphates, all phosphates they're added onto where an alcohol had been. And so that would be an enol right here. Alkene, alcohol, so it's an enol. So this is enolase. It's our good friend PEP. PEP is high energy. So, does anyone realize what have we not covered so far? Obviously it's step 10, the last step. We haven't covered the third checkpoint yet. So using the process of elimination, what do you suppose the third and final checkpoint is? It's step 10. Oh, there's enolase, which we already talked about that. Oh, and enolase required magnesium. We're talking about phosphates. I forgot to point that out. Step 10 is the third checkpoint. It is also where we finally make our 2 ATPs. We're multiplying everything by 2, so we make our 2 ATPs. We have PEP phosphoenolpyruvate going to form pyruvate. ADP gets transformed into an ATP. So what class or classes of enzymes do you suppose this is? This is a kinase. So it's kinase. Because there's a transfer of phosphates and ATP is used. First of all, this one's irreversible. Because remember, PEP is so high energy. Pyruvate's going to be your friend. You're going to see pyruvate a lot, by the way. Okay, what else do you suppose what's one special thing that you could probably just guess about it already? What else will it require? Magnesium, it does. It requires magnesium. Like I said, it's irreversible. What kinase do you suppose this is? This is pyruvate kinase. This one's actually named for its backwards reaction that does not exist. Okay, at least in vivo, it doesn't exist. I don't know if historically, if the way that they isolated it was going backwards in vitro or what, but it's not PEP kinase. This was pyruvate kinase. There's only a handful, if that many. I mean, there's only very few that we need to know about where they're irreversible and they're named for the backwards reaction that doesn't really exist. And this is the biggie. pyruvate kinase. So we start off with glucose, which has 6 carbons. We transformed it into pyruvate, which has 3 carbons. We've got a net total of 2 ATPs made and 1 NADH. And 2 NADHs. And those 2 NADHs will go on ultimately for most tissues to make 5 more ATP totals. 2.5 times 2 is 5. Pyruvate is one of the compounds that you're probably going to memorize the structure for by the end, or at least I hope you start to recognize it. You may not realize it now, but does anyone know what does it look like besides PEP? Where else do we get pyruvate? This is another metabolic pathway, by the way. It should kind of look like something that we've already seen, that you already had to memorize. Like, what if I did this? Let's get rid of that. Instead, we add this to it. What did that become? What did we just make?
Alanine?
Alanine. Yes, so that's why you can, so pyruvate's called the alpha keto acid of alanine. And like I said, by the end of the semester, you're going to see alpha keto acids over and over again because there are other important alpha keto acids. So if you draw an alanine and you just transform, you get rid of the amino acid and you turn that into the ketone, you made pyruvate. And so that's why we're going to find out with amino acid biosynthesis, or actually not biosynthesis, but biosynthesis, and as well as some of the liver metabolism, and let's see what else. There are other ones I can't think of it off the top of my head that we'll see this, and this is one way that we can go back and forth. So you can imagine now if you're low on energy, and so your glucose gets low, this is one way to help make energy, right? You make proteins, the alanine's amino acid from the proteins, it can then be transformed into pyruvate. Pyruvate then can go on, just like it would from glycolysis. Okay. So that's one of the possibilities. That's the kind of logic you have to start to think about by the end of the semester. The way that they start to interconnect. And the reason why this built-in redundancy can make it to where you can have a mutation in one of these pathways and not necessarily completely die from it or die quickly from it, because we have backups. We may be miserable, but or wasting.
Like those checkpoints more specifically, or just that it is a checkpoint?
No, we are. We're going to go through more the checkpoints and more in specifics. In fact, I think it's the entire next chapter talks about how to go through. I mean, we talked about it a little bit now, but it goes through about, because we haven't discussed gluconeogenesis yet. So under what conditions are we going to do glycolysis versus gluconeogenesis? So it's not futile. Okay, there. That's what we did. This is just a little picture showing actually what I've been doing so far. Yeah.
So, like, on a test or a quiz, would we just be, like, kind of given, like, the handout, you give it, like, the PowerPoint slides and, like, fill it in, or, like?
There could be lots of different ways. Sometimes I just pick an individual reaction step in the middle, and you may have to name the enzyme, there's something missing and you do it. Sometimes I'll ask, about the control point, checkpoints, especially when we start talking about comparing glycolysis and gluconeogenesis. There are lots of ways to go about this. Like through steps, like for NADH, be able to recognize the dehydrogenase, kinases versus phosphorylases, that kind of thing. All right, so we have free energy. There are 10 reactions. If you add them all up overall, then it's net negative, so therefore it would work. However, you have to have the 3 biggies, the 3 checkpoints in order for this to be true. Okay, and so it's hexokinase, phosphofructokinase 1, and pyruvate kinase, steps 1, 3, and 10. Please don't just tell me steps 1, 3, and 10. Because we're going to find out later on, like in part 2 of this, that you don't always start with step 1. And secondly, there are ways around it to where step 3 and glycolysis doesn't match up to 3 in gluconate, something like that. So you need to understand the enzyme names and what's going on there. Don't just memorize numbers. Especially whenever you get citric acid cycle, since it's circular, I have been known to deliberately not put step 1 at the top, but to put it down like where, and it just throws people off because I've just memorized numbers. And so you don't want to do that. Oh, this is just a figure to show you how overall, don't memorize the number, but that we've already seen this kind of stuff before, to where, just for example, on PFK, 1, normally just to add an inorganic phosphate to make fructose 1,6 bisphosphate, it would take almost 17 kilojoules of energy. That's because that inorganic phosphate's already happy. There's all the resonance and all that kind of stuff. But by coupling it to the hydrolysis of ATP, we get out negative 30.5. So when you add these two together, overall, it's almost due to the presence of PFK1, that enzyme, we get almost negative 14. But once again, I don't want you to memorize the numbers. Just understand how it's coupled to the hydrolysis of ATP. And if there's a checkpoint. Okay. Here we're going to go. Pyruvate. Our good friend pyruvate. Remember we talked, there are 3 pathways for pyruvate. Once we get here, depending upon our being aerobic versus anaerobic and our cellular needs, energy needs, we can go in one of 3 ways. Well, for some organisms, we go one of 3 ways. For us, we can go one of 2 ways. And so we already talked about the fact that you can enter in, I'm going to go with the 3rd one down, because that's us. I call it step 0 of the citric acid cycle, because it's really not a part of the citric acid cycle. It's not a part of glycolysis. It's, well, we're not Catholic, but for faith integration, it's purgatory in that sense. Okay, it's neither here nor there. It's the in-between step. I call it step 0. I also use Moses in the Holy Land. Because pyruvate, once again, is like Moses, whereas if you think of the citric acid cycle as being the Holy Land, pyruvate does not get to enter in. And so it has to be converted to acetyl-CoA. And so that's why it's an oxidative decarboxylation reaction, which is a mouthful. But then if we're aerobic, we are aerobic. Under aerobic conditions, we would do the 3rd step, that one, the oxidative decarboxylation to make acetyl-CoA. Acetyl-CoA goes into the citric acid cycle. Under anaerobic conditions, you do the 2nd one. Okay, to where, so your muscles can't get oxygen to them quick enough, and so you need to regenerate the NAD, NADH equilibrium, because so much of this really has to do with that homeostasis. We have a finite pool of NAD, NADH, and FAD, FADH2. Your body does not just easily make more, okay? And so you have to be able to keep that ratio in check. Same thing with ATP and ADP, by the way. Okay, so your body keeps that ratio in check. And so under anaerobic conditions where you're just really working out and you have time for the oxidation to occur, we go on to make lactate. It's reduced to lactate for pyruvate. And then yeast and certain microbial organisms, instead of going to lactate, they also have the option under anaerobic conditions to form alcohol, ethanol. So the important thing here is you have to realize that you have to have this continual supply of NAD+, which may seem counterintuitive, because we say, well, NADH is what's used to make energy, to make more ATP, but we have a limited amount of NAD+. So if we get lots of NADH made, before it has a chance to be reoxidized to form NAD+, you would actually short-circuit the cycle and you would die. And so what happens is if there's no oxygen there, in order for oxidative phosphorylation to occur, we actually have to find a different way until we form lactate.
You said in vivo, when under anaerobic conditions, it's the lactate, right? The ethanol.
Yes, here, I've got a little routine. So this is extremely important. I like this one shows you where it's doubled up to where now you can clearly see here glycolysis. Oh, look, we get 2 NADHs, we get 2 ATPs here, and 2 more ATPs at this point. But then what happens here and you get 2 pyruvate in the end. I shouldn't say normal, because it is still normal for you to be under anaerobic conditions when you're exercising, right? So under aerobic conditions, for us, pyruvate undergoes, you're going to find out it's called the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex, in order to make acetyl-CoA, which enters into the citric acid cycle. Under anaerobic conditions for us, like for contracting muscles, we have to get that NAD plus back so we don't short circuit the cycles. And so we do that to form lactate. So you literally feel the burn. You form lactic acid. Okay. Now for yeast, for example, they under anaerobic conditions, they can form alcohol. Of course, that's like brewer's yeast. You know, that's what brewers used in order to make, alcohol in general. Okay, so now we're looking at, just for us for lactate fermentation. Oh, right. Knowing what we know about enzymes. So there's pyruvate. You can kind of see where it still looks like, alanine. Once again, that ketone in the middle, just replace it with an amino acid, with an amino group, and then it becomes alanine. So this one's pyruvate. It uses an NADH to make an NAD+. That way the NAD+ can be used later on for not short circuit cycle. And we get lactate in the end. So the only difference between pyruvate and lactate is the fact that we've turned a ketone into an alcohol. So what class or classes of enzymes can this be? What class of enzymes utilize NAD and NADH? It's a dehydrogenase. So if you're going to name this one, what could we name it? What's one of the possible names for this one? You could say pyruvate dehydrogenase or lactate dehydrogenase. This one's lactate dehydrogenase. It is reversible, and this one's lactate dehydrogenase. We're going to find out pyruvate dehydrogenase is a different enzyme. That's the enzyme that turns pyruvate to acetyl-CoA. Okay. And technically, it's called pyruvate dehydrogenase complex because it is a factory. It's huge, and there's actually multiple enzymes that all come together. It's a caboose. There, that's my faith in tradition. It's the early church. No, it's coming together, and I have to try.
So for this one, would we need to include the NADH?
To NAD. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, one way, many times, it's a lot of times it's even written this way. Here, let me just show you. Okay, sound effects optional. I'm going to abbreviate, I don't want to have to draw it all the way out, but there's pyruvate going to form lactate. And sometimes the way that they draw it is they draw it this way. This way is NADH. Technically, it's NADH in a proton, by the way, forming NAD+. And the backwards way would be the opposite. Of course, it's NAD plus going to NADH. So sometimes they do it as those little arrows on top of the arrows and things like that. Or you can just write it out in NADH and that's the same thing. So later on we're going to see it with those little arrows either going like U's or like what I did before where they kind of like curly Q's going all the way through the reaction arrow. Okay. The next slides actually aren't as important. This just shows you that you can only do this for short periods of time because you can imagine whenever you get to a certain level here, which don't memorize these numbers, this is an acid, right? And so it will do damage to you. And so your tissue becomes exhausted. You're going to use up all your energy. So that's only short term. That's the short term fix. That's the energy. It's very energetically favorable. Please notice. That's why your muscles get a lot of energy out of this to do it. But you notice you don't get a lot of ATP, but you get a lot of free energy, I should say. But once again, it's only for the short term. All right, so what about yeast and the other microorganisms that instead of doing it to make lactate, they can use this to make ethanol?
Do yeast and these other organisms have, like, ever undergo under aerobic also, or is it always just anaerobic?
No, they do aerobic.
Oh, they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why. Well, okay, no, let's do it this way. That's why if you're doing biofuels, like bioethanol, or if you're going to your own alcohol, but if you're doing bioethanol, you have to do it under anaerobic conditions, because otherwise the default until it completely ran out of energy would be to do aerobic. And so that's why they put it in vats that deliberately add in carbon dioxide or something, and they suck out all the oxygen from the yeast, and then the yeast live by making the alcohol then. Okay, so now we have two types. In order, it's a two-step process for yeast, and I like to include this in there, even though we don't talk a lot about yeast, because it helps us get an idea of different types of cofactors involved, as well as gives us an idea of different classes of enzymes. So for this first one, it's a decarboxylation reaction. Pyruvate becomes acetaldehyde, which, if you remember, that's just acid means two. That's an old historical name for two. Two carbon-containing aldehydes. And we get carbon dioxide. Well, we don't. The yeast get carbon dioxide out of this process. It does require TPP, which we're going to see TPP later on with us as well. We don't, so far we haven't talked about it. But thymine pyrophosphate, and it requires magnesium as well. For similar reasons that we have magnesium with, for similar reasons that we have magnesium with phosphates. A lot of times with carboxylates, you'll see magnesium around. What class or classes of enzymes could this be? This is decarboxylase, and so if you're going to name it, what would you name it? That's easy. Yep, this is pyruvate decarboxylase. I'm just going to abbreviate it this way.
Is not irreversible?
Right, this would not be, for yeast, it's not it's not reversible, at least with this enzyme. I don't know if they have some organisms can actually do carboxylation reactions as well, but that would be a different enzyme. I don't know enough about yeast to say that. Then what they do, and actually this second step, we do have something similar to this in our body. We just don't do this part. They can take the acetaldehyde, except for us, by the way, we go backwards. Okay, and so for us, we actually go backwards. They take the acetaldehyde, and then they do the NADH to NAD+, and it forms ethanol. So what class or classes of enzymes utilize this? Pardon me? This is dehydrogenase, and so if you're going to name it, there are two possible names. This one is, and it's called alcohol, actually. And we do have alcohol dehydrogenase for us, but that's why for people who imbibe in alcohol, this is the first step for us to metabolize the alcohol. So the ethanol itself does have some negative side effects, but many of the negative side effects due to ethanol consumption or overconsumption is due to the fact that acetaldehyde is toxic. Okay, and so that's why if it stays around your body for too long, then bad things can happen. For us, the acetaldehyde then gets turned into acetic acid. And so then acetaldehyde dehydrogenase comes in, and we get acetic acid out of it. Of course, that's essentially vinegar, and we can excrete the acetic acid. But no one actually is alcohol dehydrogenase. Okay. All right. And do I have one more? Oh, yeah, that's why. I just want to talk a little bit about TPP, just briefly. TPP comes from this is vitamin B1. Or I should say it's not. It's derived from vitamin B1. And what we see is TPP are used in the types of reactions where you are going to break a bond next door to a carbonyl. Okay. So alpha to that. So for us, especially, where we're going to see this in the very near future, is whenever we have this we have an alpha keto acid, So that means next door to the carboxylic acid is a ketone. Then we can actually break that carbon-carbon bond and get rid of a carbon dioxide. Okay, and so the functional part, which my old first biochemistry professor I had, first one that I did metabolic pathways with, I should say, he would always call it the business end. The business end is this weird-looking organic moiety here. Is this ring? It's called a thiazolium ring. Thi, of course, comes from sulfur. Azo is for a nitrogen, and it's positively charged, so that's why it's a thiazolium ring. And so it's this ring right here, at this position right here, that you can actually add and take away things. And we won't go through the electron pushing for it right now, but this is TPP. And so we're going to see TPP many times when we need that break that bond break that carbon-carbon bond that's adjacent to a ketone. Okay, but especially for us with decarboxylation reactions.
So that's basically pyruvate, based on what you said, right?
Right. And that pyruvate, in that last example right there, we have the pyruvate decarboxylase. It required a TPP. We're going to find out TPP is used for us as well for our pyruvate dehydrogenase complex, because we're going to try to get rid of one of those to form acetyl-CoA. We're going to see it later on as well in part of the citric acid cycle. We see it another time in the citric acid cycle when we got to get rid of that carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
We break that bond right there, so we're going to use TPP as one of our cofactors. Okay.